So I'm just going to get us started with some housekeeping rules and general introductions. And first of all, I'm Maggie Allen. I know you can't see my video, but I am the host of today's webinar, and I coordinate the aquarium network I mentioned. I'll be helping facilitate this webinar along with Bree Shaughnessy, who is also here as a host that you can see, and she's also been supporting these webinars with me for the past few years. And so just general housekeeping reminders, I'll go through this pretty quick because it seems like everyone's in okay. And we're all very familiar with webinars at this point. But if you're having any sound issues at all, if you end up not being able to hear us or something at some point, you can always call into the telephone number here listed here as a backup. But you're all basically muted throughout the webinar anyway, so I think we should be okay. So if you do have any questions during the presentation, just put them in the chat box. And so I should just say one presenter, Devin, will answer them after the talk. But I also think because we have a smaller group today and this is a more interactive discussion, Devin might answer them during the talk. And also at the end of the presentation, if we have a discussion, we can take you all off mute. So I should say that as well. And then this webinar will be recorded in just a second and posted on our YouTube page that we now have. So feel free to share this webinar afterwards with your colleagues or any other folks, or watch it again. And so for anyone who missed it, not to worry, it will be posted in a few days, and you'll also get a link to that as well if you've registered on Adobe. And so, like I said, this webinar is hosted by the Coastal Ecosystem Learning Centers Network. And I'll just go through this really quickly as well, because maybe some of you are already very familiar with who we are. So we're a group of 25 aquariums across North America, and NOAA's Office of Education coordinates this group. And together we work to engage the public in protecting coastal and marine and freshwater ecosystems. The Aquaculture Initiative is one of our many, or I guess few other priorities that we work on as a network. The initiative works to connect NOAA resources to better engage aquarium visitors on the science of aquaculture, as well as its various issues and education angles and all other topics. This webinar series is one of our main activities with the Aquaculture Initiative, and really it's one of the only ones that is directly under the CELC network that's still ongoing, because really this Aquaculture Initiative has expanded throughout NOAA into a larger community of practice, which Devin's part of now as a mini grantee recipient. And Brianna manages that community of practice and the larger network across NOAA and across all informal nonprofit organizations that have received mini grants with us. So if you want to learn more about that or the CELC network or anything like that, please contact me or Brianna. Our emails are in this slide for any more information about any of that. And we're happy to chat more. Or if you'd like to be added to this webinar listserv and you're not added, also email me and I'm happy to add you to that. And then I'm just going to quickly, kind of as a way to introduce Devin, talk about how she is a member of this community of practice, and that is through the aquaculture mini grants that I mentioned that Bree manages. And so these awards are called the EE Blue Aquaculture Literacy Mini Grants. We did distribute this funding opportunity a couple of years ago with the North American Association for Environmental Education through our 5-year partnership with them called EE Blue. So that was how they were managed. The goal of these mini grants were to identify and support innovative ways to engage a target audience with discussions about aquaculture topics. And we ended up funding informal learning institutions that partnered with an aquaculture industry member, as well as a NOAA partner, which included Sea Grant or a National Estuarine Research Reserve site. So those were kind of the eligible projects. So Devin, like I said, the Cultured Abalone project was a recipient of one of these mini grants. And just really briefly as well, some of you may be very familiar with this, but these were the projects that were funded. So as you can see, Cultured Abalone Farm is out there in California, and along with 9 other projects that encompass 6 states and 4 regions, totaling about $149,000 that were basically funded through both our office, the National Marine Fisheries, the NOAA Fisheries, and the Sea Grant office. So we had a lot of help, a lot of partners, funding a lot of really great work all over the country on aquaculture education. And so with that, I'll introduce Devin to present on her project and what she's done with that. I'll just do a really quick bio of Devin. So as I said, Devin is the Hatchery and Production Director at the Cultured Abalone Farm in Santa Barbara, California. She's built her expertise in abalone husbandry and production over the past 5 years. Devin has a master's in environmental science and management from University of California in Santa Barbara. And then early on, Devin explored marine science and education, working as a research scuba diver and as an educator at an interactive science museum. And in 2018, Devin found her true calling, which was abalone farming. And working at the intersection of science, education, animal husbandry, and food, Devin quickly established her place in the aquaculture community with her main objective to produce red abalone for the food industry. So she's also a driving force in abalone restoration across California. So this presentation will cover abalone aquaculture, focused on Cultured Abalone Farm's high school education program, which used white abalone aquaculture as a way to teach teenagers about this industry. So with that, I'm just gonna stop sharing this slide, and then I'm gonna start sharing Devin's presentation, which I believe is right here. So with that, take it away, Devin. Thank you.
Perfect. I hope everyone can hear me. Sorry. Also, I am at home with my dog, who usually is at the farm. So he's sleeping right now, but he might bark. Hopefully not. Okay, so to introduce myself, hi everyone. My name is Devin Spencer. As Maggie said, I'm the Hatchery and Production Director at the Cultured Abalone Farm in Santa Barbara. My job includes everything from spawning abalone all the way through getting them to point of sale. So all of the animal husbandry, all of the animal management between egg and sperm and point of sale. And then if you're interested in connecting after this presentation, follow us on our Instagram at Cultured Abalone. You can also find me on LinkedIn, or you can send me an email. And I encourage you to connect. I love education and outreach, as you will see with this presentation. And then throughout the presentation, since it is a small group, I would prefer to answer questions if you have them as they come. I'm happy to do that. And then I am going to get started with a little bit of an interactive portion. So if you don't mind putting your answers in the chat, I want to get everyone thinking and let me know how much they know about aquaculture. So my first question is, how many species of abalone are there in the state of California? These are good. 33. Awesome. I think that was about everyone. All right. I know Kathy, you probably know. Okay. So there are 7 species of abalone in the state of California. Oh, here comes Kathy. There are the white abalone that live down deep in the cooler waters, all the way to black abalone that are growing along the coastal regions. We have a lot here in California. And at the Cultured Abalone Farm, we are growing red abalone as our main product, and that abalone is produced for a food is a food product. And then we also grow some green abalone for a restoration project. And we work with the Bodega Marine Lab and the White Abalone Restoration Program to grow white abalone, which are outplanted for restoration purposes. All right, so my next question, what is the difference between onshore aquaculture and offshore aquaculture? And you can keep it short. But once again, if you want, type it in the chat.
And I assume it has to be a little bit more than one is onshore and one is offshore, right?
Yes, yes, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah.
That can also be correct.
I guess that is a correct answer.
So I didn't mean to.
You gave it away.
Yeah. Spoilers. It looks like we
Tank
have some
based
coming
versus,
in.
yeah. Yeah, so we've got tank based versus open nets. Interesting. Wait for one more. Okay, so these are actually really cool answers. I've got tank-based versus open nets, land versus ocean. Thank you, Kathy. Onshore, live on the water, and then offshore can live on both water or land. Filtration versus no filtration. That does make a difference. And then something to do with tides and land versus deep water. All right, so here we go. Offshore versus onshore aquaculture. So offshore aquaculture is aquaculture that is occurring in the ocean. So here you've got fin fish cages in the open ocean. And then I saw, Andrew, you're from Waikiki Aquarium. They have these in Kona, right off the coast of Kona. And they're raising, oh my gosh, I want to say tilapia, not kampachi in those guys. So that's pretty much in open water. And then here in California, we actually have some offshore aquaculture where they are growing seaweed on lines out in the middle of the ocean. They're about 3 miles off in federal waters. In contrast, at the Cultured Abalone Farm, we are an onshore production facility, meaning we're all in tanks on land, which makes it a little easier because we're not donning scuba gear and all that, but we have to pump our water from the ocean to our tanks. And with onshore aquaculture, you can add filtration. We are a completely unfiltered system, so we're on all raw seawater. The water just comes in from the ocean and then is distributed to our tanks and goes right back out to the ocean. So there's no filtration, no other inputs other than raw seawater. All right, I think this is my last question. What is the difference between a flow-through system and a recirculating system? And this has to do with onshore aquaculture. You can't really have a flow-through system or recirculating system with offshore. I don't think, unless they classify it in some way. Oh, okay, y'all are great. You know a lot about aquaculture. So we have flow through is an open system and recirculating is a closed system. Less control versus more control. Closed loop recirculation versus straight flow through, water in and out. Recycled versus not. Flow through water is pumped from the ocean, used in a facility and dumped back in the ocean. Recirc is closed, but can have some makeup water. These are all great answers. And we have both at the Cultured Abalone Farm. So the majority of our tanks are flow-through tanks. Like I was saying, there is no filtration, no temperature control, nothing on those flow-through tanks. It's whatever the ocean gives us. And that water goes in through an incoming water pipe and goes out through a drain. And then we also have a recirculating system. Can you see my little pointer? I think you can. So we have a recirculating system in our hatchery. That's because our larvae are very sensitive to temperature change. And so in this system, we control the temperature so that our larvae are not getting temperature shock. And so this does have a little bit of makeup water coming in. That's raw seawater, but for the most part, this reservoir is holding the water that is servicing all of the tanks just to the right of this room, which you can't see. And then we do have a little bit of filtration on our recirculating system. It's just a sediment filter, so I don't have to clean the reservoir all the time because it has a bunch of sediment in it. But we don't treat our water with UV or anything like that because I believe that these animals are natural. They grow in the wild. They're meant to be in the wild. And the more natural of an environment you can give them, the better success you're going to have. All right, so give you a little further introduction about who we are. As I said, I work for the Cultured Abalone Farm. We are an onshore abalone farm in Santa Barbara, California. We were established in 1989 when the commercial abalone fisheries were kind of collapsing. The fisheries finally closed in 1997, I believe. And so this was kind of right at the forefront of continuing to supply abalone after those commercial fisheries had been closed. We produce red abalone as our food product, and then we work with white abalone for restoration purposes. And in addition, we've been not growing, but we've been fattening purple sea urchins to create a new urchin product. You can see the photo down here on the bottom left. And then we grow a lot of seaweed. So we grow two different types of red seaweed. We grow dulse and ogo, and we feed those two seaweeds to our abalone to increase the variety of foods that they're receiving. And then our customers are mostly high-end restaurants and home chefs. All right, so next I'm going to talk to you a little about our abalone aquaculture education program. As Maggie was saying, we got a grant through EE Blue and NAAEE to create an education program with Santa Barbara Sea Center and then NOAA Southwest Fisheries Science Center. And we implemented our pilot at Santa Barbara High School. And conveniently, they actually have a marine science program, so it was a perfect fit. Okay, so our goals, we had a three-part program. We wanted to introduce high school students to aquaculture. We wanted to educate the informal educators about aquaculture, so Sea Center volunteers and staff. And then we wanted to update the Sea Center abalone exhibit to highlight aquaculture. So we had three different audiences for this program. Obviously, Santa Barbara High School students in the marine science class. Our second audience was Santa Barbara Sea Center staff and volunteers. And then by default, by teaching the Sea Center staff and volunteers, the general public became our audience. So what did we achieve? Our first goal was to develop a unit of instruction and farm tour program with Santa Barbara High School. We did that, and we implemented the program in Santa Barbara High School over a year, and we had 3 different classes visit us. So our goal was to work with Santa Barbara High School, and we achieved that. And then we also had 5 other schools hear about our program and connect with us and come take a tour and engage in some of those unit of instruction materials that we had created. And then our second goal was to teach 11 Sea Center staff and volunteers about aquaculture and how it's important to white abalone restoration so that they could better convey that message to the general public when they were coming to the aquarium. And our program was very popular, and we ended up bringing, I think, 3 groups of Sea Center staff and volunteers, and we hope to continue bringing Sea Center staff and volunteers so that they can be engaged and better explain and teach aquaculture to the general public. And then our third goal was to reimagine the Sea Center's white abalone exhibit to highlight the importance of aquaculture in abalone restoration. And they did an excellent job with that. The new white abalone exhibit at the Sea Center highlights aquaculture and helps to communicate why aquaculture is important. There are, I think, a lot of negative viewpoints on aquaculture, but it's doing great things and it can be done correctly. And I think this is a great way of sharing that with those who are unaware of it. So what were our challenges and opportunities during this program? Our biggest challenge was personnel turnover. Both the aquarium business and aquaculture, as many of you probably know, they don't pay super well. They have a lot of turnover. They're not as glamorous as we think they're going to be, so you have to get the right person in there. So on both sides, we had a lot of turnover, so we kept having to kind of restart the program a little bit. But that also led to a lot of opportunities because it's a really exciting thing to be in. Everyone wants to learn about aquaculture. People want to stick their hands in tanks. So while there was a lot of new people coming in, it was really exciting because we kept getting new people to teach about aquaculture and to bring to the farm. So what is up next for us? We hope to continue our collaboration with the Sea Center and Santa Barbara High School. Santa Barbara High School hasn't started class yet, but I am in conversation with the teacher, and we are hopefully going to do 2 more rounds of classes with the high school students and also develop some labs that are related to aquaculture for them to do in the classroom. And then I want to expand to other high schools. That hasn't happened yet, but I'm working on that. Also trying to focus on farming right now. And then our third is developing a public tour program. We have a lot of people who are really interested in coming and visiting us. And this whole ecotourism thing has been really taking off. So we have done a few public tours and they've gone really, really well. And we're working on developing a program so that we can continuously provide that as a resource for people to come learn about aquaculture and abalone. All right, so that is the end of my presentation. And let's start. If anyone has any questions, I want to start there. And then if we want to talk a little bit about aquaculture and how we can better bring it into the lives of others, I would love to facilitate that discussion. All right, we've got a couple of questions. The first one is from Tiffany, and it says, what proportion of kelp versus red seaweed do you use, and how do you determine the ratio? That is a great question. We usually feed about 20,000 pounds of kelp a week. That's all harvested off the Santa Barbara coast. And we just give it a little haircut. So we take about the first 2 meters of seaweed off the top and then it grows back. And typically we feed the majority of our animals that kelp. And then the red seaweed is mostly fed to our juvenile animals. So anything that's under 15 millimeters in size. However, with those big rains this year, all of the kelp beds got wiped out. And so we've been having a really hard time finding places that kelp is growing. So we've actually been ramping up our red seaweed production in order to supplement our larger animals with that red seaweed. Did that help, Tiffany? Perfect. Okay. Next question is from Andrew, and it says, overhead netting is for shading or predator control? That's also a great question. The overhead netting is mostly for shading. We are open on all sides, so animals can still get in. The biggest predators for us tend to be raccoons and rats, but we do have a couple of cats and a couple of dogs that try and keep those guys down. But yeah, the netting is mostly for shading. Algae will overgrow our top tanks, and so having a little bit of shade helps. It also prevents it from getting so hot. And then if you ever get to come to the farm, you'll see we have much lighter shading over our Ogo tanks, which is our red seaweed, and that's because they need more light to grow. All right. The next one is from Madeline. Let's see. What are your next steps for moving this pilot into a fully implemented program? And would you do anything differently if you could do it again? Next steps into moving it into a pilot project. Right now, I have not been focusing on it because we've been having a lot of more pressing problems with the lack of seaweed and the warming waters, which Bree and Maggie and I were just talking about. I heard Florida has 100-degree water, so that's crazy. Yeah, so I haven't done a whole lot of trying to move it forward. Like I said, I hope to continue to work with Santa Barbara High School here this coming year. And if I could do it differently again, I would definitely have a teacher create the units of instruction and be a reference on that rather than creating them myself, because it took me a lot of time, and I think that a teacher would be a much better person to create those resources than me. Okay, let's see. We got Maggie. Andrew again asks, how long does it take from larval stage to marketable size, and can this be accelerated? Another great question. From larval stage to market size, it takes anywhere from 3 to 5 years, and market size is about 3¼ inches for us. At least that's the first point at which we sell our abalone. And acceleration, so we can do some genetic, like animals genetically. So I pick out the biggest, fastest growing animals to be my brood stock. But other than that, they grow pretty slow. The more we feed them, the better, and the colder the water, the better. But we don't have a whole lot of control over the water temperature. So they just kind of grow at the speed that they want to grow. The red abalone, though, are the fastest growers in terms of them growing in Santa Barbara. Okay. Next question is from Tiffany again. Do you know about what biomass of abalone 2,000 pounds of kelp feed per week? I don't know the biomass. We have about 1 million abalone on site, and almost all of those receive kelp. So that feeds our entire farm for 1 week. Are you currently marketing the abalone you grow? That's from David. We don't do a whole lot of marketing. We are working on getting into a bunch of Michelin star restaurants right now, and I'm on that side of things as well. And we do sell our abalone on our website. So if you are a home chef, you are more than welcome to go there and you just order it. It comes whole and live straight to your door. It's super easy. You even get to pick what day you want to receive it. So we don't have to do a whole lot of marketing. Most of our marketing is done through Instagram, and that's a great place to figure out what's going on at the farm. All right, another question from Lauren. She asks, how much of your space time is dedicated to the white abalone restoration? That's a great question, Lauren. Right now we have one set of tanks that is dedicated to the white abalone restoration program, but we are hoping to have more. And time-wise, at this stage, so they're all between about 3 and 5 millimeters in size. They don't take a whole lot of effort. We're simply giving them red seaweed and making sure their tank is clean. And we'll grow them up to about 25 millimeters. And then the people who outplant them will come and grab them and take them to their facility before they put them back in the ocean. All right, is there any other, oh, here's another question. What is the average lifespan for an abalone? That is also a very good question. I've read up to 40 years, but I'm not sure exactly on that one. We have abalone all the way from 2013, so 10 years in our tanks that I still use for spawning, and they are my favorite abalone to use for spawning. But after about 10 years, we don't keep track of the age of the abalone. All right, are there any other questions? Okay, Maggie asks, do you have any available resources and do you have a process of working with formal educators to develop those? If so, what is your process or plan? So I do have some resources that I created through the EE Blue grant. It's mostly a lecture series that uses abalone as um, a study for aquaculture. So I have those available if anyone is interested in using them. And then I love working with educators. As Maggie said in my bio, I worked as an informal educator here in Santa Barbara at our informal science museum, and I would love to work with educators. I love to teach people about aquaculture. I love to talk about abalone. So if anyone's interested, please just email me. Oh, great question. What is the main average degree to keep the abalone safe and secure? So our abalone like to be between about 52 and 55 degrees. Right now, the surface water in Santa Barbara is about 65 degrees, and our tanks are reading about 60 degrees. So while they are fine, like they're not going to die in that warmer water, at least when it's 60 degrees, they eat a lot slower, they grow a lot slower, they move a lot slower, they kind of just shut down and go into like survival mode. Oh, yeah, that's great. Thanks, Lauren. That was pretty close. I think I got that from the AOP website, actually. Yeah. Okay. So Bree wants to know about the relationship we built with the museum staff and what that process looked like. So I worked with, originally I worked with a person named Nora. She's now actually at the White Abalone Restoration Program in Bodega Bay. But we kind of came up with this plan to teach people about white abalone restoration and teach specifically high schoolers about white abalone restoration. So what we did was we brought them to the farm, the Sea Center volunteers and staff to the farm and just gave them a tour and let them ask any questions they wanted about abalone, about aquaculture, and how they could relate that to what they're doing at the Sea Center, which they are raising white abalone with the same Bodega Bay white abalone restoration program to outplant. And then they also have some brood stock. So I also actually worked with them a little bit in spawning their abalone, and we talked to visitors about white abalone and white abalone restoration and how aquaculture is really allowing that to happen. Does that answer your question, Bree? Perfect. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Devin, I have a personal question for you. Well, slightly
Yeah,
on your bio, it
absolutely.
said you found your like true calling doing this. I was wondering, kind of how you had a lot of experience before this, and what kind of led you to find that this was your true calling, and how did you kind of figure out that this was where you needed to be in life?
Absolutely. Yeah. So my story kind of starts when I was in high school. I was actually terrified of the ocean and refused to step foot in it. I grew up in Colorado, so, not a whole lot of ocean there. But I actually got accepted to go to a marine science summer school in Hawaii, on the Big Island of Hawaii. And my mom basically told me, you're either going to have to get in the water when you're in that class or you're going to fail. And I was definitely a lot more scared of failure than getting in the water. So I got in the water and I snorkeled for the first time of my life. And I was so smitten with everything under the water. I just had never stuck my face in the water. Um, so that really set me on a trajectory towards something in marine science. When I was in college, I got a environmental science degree and a communications degree. And then I spent my summers at the University of Hawaii in Hilo, doing marine science summer classes and just swimming in the ocean with all the marine creatures. And then I got my master's in environmental science and management at UCSB at the Bren School, where I continued to focus on coastal resources. And I was working as a research diver there for a couple of labs at UCSB. So I did a lot of diving in pea soup here off of the coast of Santa Barbara. Um, and then I also knew I loved education and I loved food. So I wanted to go into something that was a combination of food, education, and marine science. But I don't particularly enjoy doing science for the sake of science. I really like caring for animals. I grew up with a lot of animals. And I actually got a job at the Kampachi farm in Hawaii, and decided not to move there. And I found the abalone farm here and begged them for a job. And I started as a tank cleaner, working 2 days a week while I was working 2 other jobs. And I just cleaned tanks until I got promoted. And eventually things fell into place, and I now am in charge of all of the production. So I guess my story just shows a little bit of hard work, and not being afraid to get dirty will get you a long way. All right, we have one more question from Andrew. It says, are abalone facultative hermaphrodites? Oh gosh. How do you trigger spawning and ensure sperm and egg mix of gametes is different? Okay, so the first question, I honestly don't even know what that means. So there are males and females. If that is what you're asking. Sorry, Andrew. Here's my non-science coming in. He's typing. Oh, sorry, just waiting. Oh gosh, everyone knows what this is except for me. Okay, well, I'll go on to the triggering spawning. So it means one. Okay, got it. Yes, that is actually a great question, and I think that abalone can change sex. I have put animals that I know are females into a particular location, and I've come back several months later and found that not all of my animals are females, but that has not yet been proven. But they are identifiably male or female. You can look at their gonads. Males are a bright yellow color in red abalone, and females are a bright blue color. And so what I do is I separate those animals into different buckets, males and females, and then we induce spawning using hydrogen peroxide. So the animals sit in a nice bath of hydrogen peroxide for about 2 hours, and then we rinse that hydrogen peroxide, which kind of stresses them out, and then add fresh seawater. And once that seawater is in, they'll actually release their gametes pretty quickly. And then I am in charge of hand fertilizing everything. So I check all of the egg and sperm quality. I check for sperm motility, and then I hand fertilize all of those eggs and make sure that there's the right sperm ratio to egg in order to get the ultimate embryo creation. And I actually get about 90% success rate with my embryos, which is pretty cool. I usually have somewhere around 20 million eggs and come out with about 12 million embryos, and the rest of those eggs I don't fertilize because I can only hold 12 million. All right. I have another question from Tiffany. Can you comment on what the water flow environment is like for juveniles versus adults? Does it need to be fast and strong? That's a good question. The water environment, yes, it is fast and strong. They like to congregate where there is more water flow. So in all of our tanks, at the head of the tank is where the water is coming in, and we have always a lot more abalone collected there at the head of the tank where the water is turbulent than where the water is not turbulent. In addition, we have aeration under our tanks, and it's pretty vigorous. So when we have aeration that doesn't work, the abalone do not like that, and they'll actually all crawl out of their tank. So yeah, they do like fast and strong water flow, and that's the same for the large animals as well. All right, any other questions? And if any of you are ever in Santa Barbara, I would love to host you so that you can see it for yourself. All right, Andrew has one more question.
Okay, yeah. I was gonna say, and then after this, we'll wrap it up. And I know Bree has a little announcement about the mini grants as well, and he just said thank you. So
perfect. And then I have a couple other resources too, if y'all are interested. There's a couple podcasts that we have been on, so if you have more questions or just want to like listen through, a lot of those questions are hopefully answered in those two podcasts. So I can share those with you all as well.
It'd be great. Yes, please do share, and we can put them both in like the YouTube notes and
perfect.
You know, in the email as well. And any of those education resources you mentioned too would be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. I'll definitely take you up on visiting your farm if I'm ever in Santa Barbara. So thank you so much.
Of course.
Yeah, and then so yeah, thanks again, and we'll pass it over to Bree, I think, for a quick announcement.
Thanks, Maggie. Yeah, thank you, Devin. As Devin mentioned, she was one of 10 projects that we funded through this EE Blue mini grant funding a couple of years ago, and we're really happy to announce that we received the funding to do another round of mini grants. So that opportunity will open up in the late fall this year. We try to coordinate it so that by the time the funding can come through, it's during the beginning of the summer, so that folks that are working with school teachers can kind of plan with those teachers throughout the summer if they want to work with their students. So keep an eye out for some information about how you can apply. But we just really were so proud of this first round of grantees, Devin being one of the superstars in the projects. And we were really happy to share all of this information with you today. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bree. That's really exciting. Yeah, this is definitely a model of what we love to see. So yeah, so thanks again, Devin. And yeah, we'll follow up with you all about those resources and the recording in a few days, probably Monday. So if we have no more questions, we can just end a little early and stay tuned for whenever the next webinar is. So thank you everyone for joining today. And so, yeah, I know it's early in Hawaii, so thanks, Andy, for joining before coffee.
Perfect. Thank you so much, y'all.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.